Lagos was loud as always. Cars moved, horns echoed, streetlights flickered across wet roads. People walked quickly, chasing the next thing, the next opportunity, the next day. But for Mike Ease, the noise of the city had begun to fade. At 33, he had once been the kind of man Lagos talked about. Young, sharp, fearless, successful. A self-made millionaire before most men his age had even found direction. He owned properties. He ran multiple businesses. He moved with confidence, and people moved with him. His house was always full. Friends, partners, associates, laughter, music. There was always someone around, or so he thought. The first sign that something was wrong came. Quietly, too quietly. Mike sat in his office one afternoon, reviewing numbers on his laptop. The air conditioner hummed softly. Everything looked normal, until it didn't. He refreshed one of the company accounts. The number was lower than he remembered, much lower. He frowned and refreshed again. Still the same. He checked another account, then another. Each one felt off, not empty, but wrong. Money had been moving. Large amounts. He leaned back slowly in his chair, trying to make sense of it. There had been investments recently, transfers, deals, growth moves. But this didn't feel like that. This felt like something else. Something he couldn't quite name yet. The next day, he called his lawyer. They met in a quiet office across town. The lawyer spoke carefully, his voice low and measured. There have been multiple withdrawals over the past few months, he said. Large ones, authorized. Mike's eyebrows pulled together. Authorized by who? The lawyer hesitated slightly. Some of the accounts had joint signatory access, your business partners. The room went quiet. Mike didn't speak at first. His mind was racing. That's not possible, he said slowly. The lawyer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned the screen toward Mike. Transaction after transaction. Amounts that made his chest tighten, dates he recognized, signatures he had trusted. These weren't strangers. These were men he had built things with. Men who had sat in his living room. Men who had toasted to success with him. Men he called brothers. Mike stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't angry yet. He was confused, deeply confused. Maybe it's a mistake, he said quietly. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't. The days that followed moved fast, too fast. Meetings, phone calls, documents, questions, and with each new piece of information, the truth became harder to ignore. Money had been moved slowly, carefully, over time, right under his nose. And in the middle of it all, he began to see the part he played. He had trusted too easily, signed without always reading deeply, approved decisions without asking enough questions. He believed the people around him were loyal. He believed they were family, and that belief had cost him everything. The first property was frozen, then the second, then the company started losing stability. Investors pulled out quietly, contracts began to disappear. The calls stopped coming. The house started to feel different, quieter. Not because it was empty, but because something was shifting. People who used to drop by no longer came. People who used to laugh loudly now spoke in low voices, and then one by one. They disappeared. Within months the fall was complete. Legal issues tied his hands, accounts remained locked, debts piled up, assets were seized. The mansion he once walked through like a king was no longer his. The cars were taken. The staff had long gone, and the day finally came when he stood outside the gates. With a small bag in his hand, watching strangers move inside what used to be his home, Mike didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't beg. He just stood there, staring, as if maybe, if he looked long enough, it would all return. But it didn't. First, he stayed in cheap hotels, then smaller places, then he started running out of money. The little cash he had left disappeared quickly. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and slowly. Mike Ease began to disappear from the world he once knew. His clothes grew worn, his beard grew out, his posture changed, his confidence faded, he stopped looking people in the eye, he stopped being recognized. The city moved on, and so did everyone else. 1. Night. The rain came down hard, the kind of rain that soaked everything in seconds. Mike sat under a broken roadside shelter, his clothes drenched, his body thin, his face tired and rough. He looked like a man who had been through a war, and in many ways, he had. His hair was unkempt, his clothes were old, his eyes carried a weight that hadn't been there before. If someone had passed him quickly, they wouldn't have seen a former millionaire. They would have seen just another homeless man trying to stay dry. Headlights cut through the rain as a small car slowed near the roadside. The driver had almost passed, but something made her slow down. A second look, a feeling she couldn't explain. The car stopped. The engine remained running as she stepped out, holding an umbrella above her head. She walked carefully toward the shelter, and then she saw his face. Thinner, older, broken, but still him. Her eyes widened. "Sir?" Mike slowly lifted his head. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Then the pieces came together. The eyes, the voice. Eniola, the young woman who used to work in his house. The one he had fired on a day his pride had been louder than his patience. She stood there staring at him in disbelief. He looked away quickly, ashamed. He didn't want her to see him like this. Not like this. But it was too late. She had already seen everything, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Just the sound of the rain falling between them. The rain fell harder. It drummed against the metal sheets above the broken shelter, spilling down in thick streams around them. The street was nearly empty, and the few cars that passed didn't slow down. Eniola stood there, still holding the bee. Umbrella over her head, staring at the man in front of her. It was hard to believe. This was Mike Ease, the same Mike Ease who once walked through a mansion filled with people, the same Mike Ease whose name opened doors, the same Mike Ease who once stood. Tall, sharp, confident, now he sat hunched forward, soaked, thin and silent, looking like a man the world had forgotten. "Sir," she said again softly, unsure if she should even call him that anymore. Mike kept his eyes on the ground. He didn't answer, didn't move, didn't look at her. The shame sat heavy in his chest. Of all the people in the world who could have seen him like this, it had to be her. Eniola stepped closer, careful not to startle him. Up close, she could see how much he had changed. His beard was uneven, his clothes were worn and damp. His face looked tired in a way that went deeper than just being out in the rain. "Mike," she said gently this time. He slowly looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then he gave a small, tight nod. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's me." The words felt strange in his mouth, like he was introducing himself as someone else. "What happened?" she asked softly. Mike let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humour in it. "Life," he said. That was all. And in that one word, she could hear everything he wasn't saying. Eniola looked around at the rain pouring. "Down the road, then back at him." "You can't stay here," she said. Mike shook his head immediately. "I'm fine." His voice was weak, but the pride was still there, still holding on, still trying to protect what little was left of his dignity. Eniola studied him for a moment. "You're not fine," she said calmly. "You're soaked. You're cold. And you look like you haven't eaten properly." Mike looked away again. "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper this time, the same tone he used to use, the tone that used to make people step back. But Eniola didn't move. She didn't step back, didn't flinch. She just stood there steady. I'm not here to argue with you, she said quietly. I'm here to help. Mike's jaw tightened. I don't need help. She held his gaze. Yes, she said gently. You do. For a moment, the rain was the only sound between them. Mike felt something rising in his chest. Not anger, not exactly, something closer to frustration, because deep down, he knew she was right, and that truth made him uncomfortable. Eniola shifted the umbrella slightly, keeping the rain from reaching him. I have a place, she said. It's small, but it's dry. Mike shook his head again. No. This time, the refusal was softer, more tired than proud. I can't, he added. Eniola tilted her head slightly. Why? He didn't answer right away. Because the real answer was hard to say out loud. Because once upon a time, he had stood in a big house and told her to leave, just like that. No explanation, no patience, just pride. And now here he was, with nothing, and she was the one offering him a roof. I don't want to be a burden, he finally said. Eniola's expression softened. You won't be, she replied. Mike let out a slow breath. His hands were shaking slightly from the cold now. His body was tired. More tired than he wanted to admit. He looked at the rain, then at the road, then back at her. Why? He asked quietly. The question wasn't defensive, it was genuine. Why help me? Eniola didn't hesitate. Because you need help, she said simply. Not revenge, not bitterness, just truth. He studied her face, looking for anger, for resentment, for something that said she was doing this for a reason. But all he saw was calm, strength, and something else, a kind of peace he couldn't explain. She took a step back and opened the passenger door of her car. Come, she said, before you catch a fever. Mike didn't move right away. His pride was still whispering, still trying to keep him where he was, but his body was too tired to keep fighting. Slowly, he stood up. His legs felt weak. His clothes clung to him, heavy with rain. He walked toward the car quietly, and as he sat down, closing the door behind him, something inside him shifted, not fully, not completely, but just enough. For the first time since losing everything, he wasn't alone. The car ride was quiet. The rain tapped against the windshield as they drove through the city. Mike leaned back, staring out the window. Lagos looked different from this side, colder, faster, unfamiliar. After a while, the car slowed and turned into a narrow street. They stopped in front of a small, simple building, nothing fancy, nothing impressive, just home. Eniola stepped out and led the way inside. Her place was small, but clean, organised, peaceful. There was a warmth in the air that Mike hadn't felt in a long time. She handed him a towel. You fine? Can use the bathroom, she said. There are some clothes there you can change into. Mike took the towel slowly. Thank you, he muttered. The words felt strange. He couldn't remember the last time he had said them like that. When he came out, wearing a simple shirt and trousers she had left for him, he looked different. Still. Tired, still thin, but human again. Eniola had placed a plate of food on the table, hot, fresh, simple. He stood there for a moment, staring at it. Then he sat down and ate, slowly at first. Then, like a man who hadn't had a real meal in a long time, Eniola didn't watch. She didn't hover. She just gave him space. After a while, Mike leaned back in the chair, his stomach full, his body finally warm. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just quiet. Then he spoke. You didn't let it stop you, he said. Eniola looked up. What? That day, he continued. When I told you to leave, you didn't let it break you. Eniola gave a small shrug. Life doesn't stop because one person closes a door, she said calmly. Mike sat with those words, and for the first time in a long time, something stirred inside him. Not pride, not regret, something else, something closer to motivation. He looked around the small room again. It wasn't big, it wasn't rich, but it was built, and she built it, without him, without anyone, from nothing, and in that moment, a thought quietly formed in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, he could start again too. The first night under Eniola's roof was the first time Mike slept without fear in months. No cold pavement, no loud street noise pressing into his ears, no waking up in the middle of the night wondering where he would go next. Just quiet. But, even in that quiet, sleep didn't come easily. He lay on the small mattress she had prepared for him in the corner of the room, staring up at the ceiling. His body was resting, but his mind was not. Memories came in waves. The mansion. The cars. The laughter. The deals. The confidence. Then the meetings. The signatures. The trust. The slow realization that everything had been slipping away while he was too sure of himself to notice. He turned to his side and closed his eyes tightly. He wasn't used to being here. He wasn't used to being the one who needed help, and deep inside, something still resisted it. The next morning, the smell of food woke him. For a second, he forgot where he was. Then he heard movement in the small kitchen area. Eniola was already awake. She moved quietly, preparing breakfast before getting ready for work. Mike sat up slowly, running a hand over his face. His beard was still rough, his body still thin. But something inside him felt calmer, still heavy, still uncertain, but calmer. He stepped out slowly. Eniola glanced up and gave a small nod. "Morning, morning," he replied. His voice was low, almost unsure. She placed a plate on the small table. "Eat," she said. "You need strength." Mike sat down. This time, he ate slower, more aware, more present. After a few minutes, he looked up at her. "You go to work?" he asked. She nodded, tying her hair neatly. "Yes." "What do you do now?" "I work at a tailoring shop," she said, "and I help a woman nearby sell food in the evenings." Mike paused. 2 jobs. He hadn't expected that. "You been doing that long?" he asked. "For a while," she replied calmly. There was no complaint in her voice, no self-pity, just facts. Mike nodded slowly. He remembered the day he fired her. He had barely asked about her life, barely listened. She was just part of the house then, part of the background, and now... She was the one standing on her own feet. When she finished getting ready, she turned to him. "There's more food in the pot," she said. "If you're still hungry later." Mike nodded. "Okay." She paused at the door. Then she looked at him carefully. "You can stay," she said. "Until you find your feet again." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Mike looked up. "Thank you," he said quietly. Eniola gave a small nod and stepped outside. The door closed gently behind her. The room was silent again. Mike sat, there for a long time. Just thinking, looking around. This place was small, simple, but everything in it had purpose. Nothing was wasted, nothing was extra. It was a life built piece by piece, and suddenly, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Shame. Not because he was poor now, but because he remembered the man he had been, the way he spoke, the way he dismissed people, the way he thought money made him secure. He leaned back, slowly, staring at the wall. "How did I fall this far?" he whispered to himself. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside for the first time. The street was busy, people passed by without looking twice. No one recognized him, and for the first time in years, he was just another man, not important, not admired, just human. It felt strange, but also real. When Eniola returned that evening, she found him sitting outside on a small bench, watching people, thinking. She sat beside him quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she asked, "What's going on in your head?" Mike let out a slow breath. "Everything," he said. She nodded slightly. "I keep replaying it," he continued. "The decisions, the people, the trust." His jaw tightened. "I thought they were my friends." Eniola didn't interrupt. "I thought we were building together," he added. "I didn't see it coming." There was a long pause. Then she spoke. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Mike nodded. "You trusted them," she said. "But you stopped paying attention." The words weren't harsh, but they were direct. Mike turned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You stopped looking closely," she continued. "You believed what people showed you on the surface." Mike didn't answer, because deep down, he knew she was right. "You were moving fast," she said, calmly. "Making big decisions, signing things, building, growing." Mike looked down. "I thought that was success." "It is," she said, "but it can also blind you." Her voice was steady. "You stopped asking questions," she added. "Stopped checking who was really standing with you." The words hit him harder than he expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then finally he said, "I don't even know where to start again." Eniola leaned back slightly. "You start small," she said. Mike looked at her. "Small?" She nodded. "Small work, small steps, small wins." He gave a tired smile. "I used to run companies." "And now," she said gently, "you learn to build again." There was no mockery in her voice, no judgment, just honesty. He watched her for a moment. "You really believe I can start again?" he asked. Eniola met his eyes. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "You're still alive," she said. "You can still think. You can still work." She shrugged slightly. "That's enough to begin." Mike sat with those words, and for the first time since everything collapsed, he felt something he hadn't felt in months, a small spark. Not confidence, not yet, but possibility. That night, as he lay down to sleep again, his mind was quieter. He wasn't thinking about what he lost. He was thinking about what was still left, his mind, his hands, his experience. And the strange thing was, it was the woman he once overlooked, who was helping him see clearly again. The next morning, Mike woke earlier than usual. For the first time in a long time, there was something sitting in his chest that wasn't just worry or regret. It was pressure, but a different kind, the kind that comes when a man knows he can't sit still anymore. He sat on the edge of the mattress, staring down at his hands. These same hands had once signed contracts worth millions. Now they felt unfamiliar, like they had forgotten what real work looked like. He stood up slowly. Today, he would step outside. Not just to walk, but to try. Eniola was already getting ready when he stepped into the small kitchen area. She glanced at him, noticing the way he was dressed, the simple shirt, the worn trousers. But something in his posture had changed. "You're going somewhere?" she asked. Mike nodded. "I want to look for work." She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once. "Good." Just one word, but it felt like approval. The sun was already hot by the time Mike reached the main road. Lagos moved quickly around him, people rushing. Vendors shouting, cars pushing through traffic. And there he was. Just another man in the crowd. He stopped in front of a small construction site. Men were carrying bags of cement, mixing sand, lifting heavy materials. Mike stood there for a moment, watching. This was far from the boardrooms he used to sit in, far from the air-conditioned offices, far from the suits and polished shoes. He hesitated. Then he walked forward. The supervisor looked him up and down. "You want work?" the man asked. Mike nodded. Yes, what can you do? The question felt heavier than it should have. Mike opened his mouth, then paused. He wanted to say, I used to run companies. I used to manage hundreds of workers. I built businesses from nothing. But none of that mattered here. So, he said the only thing that was true in that moment. I can learn. The supervisor stared at him for a second, then shrugged. We don't need extra hands right now. And just like that, it was over. Mike nodded quietly. Thank you, he said, and walked away. The second place was the same, and the third, and the fourth. Everywhere he went, the answer was the same. No space. We're full. Come back another time. By the afternoon, his legs were tired, his shirt clung to his back with sweat, and the small spark he felt the night before was beginning to dim. He sat on a low wall, staring at the ground. This was harder than he expected, not just physically, but inside. Every rejection felt like a reminder of how far he had fallen. When he got back, Eniola was already home. She could see it on his face before he even spoke. It didn't work out today, she asked gently. Mike shook his head. No. He sat down slowly. No one needs help, he added. Eniola leaned against the wall, arms folded. Or maybe, she said calmly, you went to the wrong places. Mike looked up. What do you mean? You're looking for the kind of work. That fills fast, she said. Try where people don't want to work. Mike frowned slightly. Like where? She shrugged. Anywhere that's hard. He let out a tired breath. I didn't think it would be this difficult. Eniola didn't respond right away. Then she said quietly, starting from the bottom always is. Mike looked at her. There was no judgment in her voice, just truth. The next morning, he tried again. This time he walked further, past the busy roads, past the shops, until he found a smaller construction site on the edge of a developing area. Dust filled the air. Men moved slowly, tired from the heat. Mike approached. Sir, he said respectfully to the man in charge. Do you need help? The man looked him over, longer this time. You done this kind of work before? The man asked. Mike shook his head. No, but I'm willing. The man studied his hands. They were soft. Not used to this. You sure? The man asked. This work is not easy. Mike nodded slowly. I know. There was a long pause. Then the man pointed toward a pile of sand. Carry that to the back, he said. Let's see if you last the day. The bag was heavier than Mike expected. By the second trip, his arms were burning. By the fourth, his shoulders ached. By the sixth, his breath came in short bursts. This was work, real work, but he kept going. Steps. By step, back and forth, until the sun began to set. At the end of the day, the supervisor walked over. You worked, the man said simply. Mike nodded, breathing hard. The man handed him a small amount of cash. Come back tomorrow if you want. Mike looked at the money in his hand. It wasn't much, not even close to what he used to spend in a day, but it was honest. He closed his fingers around it tightly. Thank you, he said, and for the first time, it felt different. It felt earned. That evening. He walked back slowly. His body ached, his hands were sore. But inside, something felt steady. When he entered the room, Eniola looked up. She saw the way he walked, the way his shoulders were stiff, and the way he was holding something in. His hand. You found something, she said. Mike nodded. Construction site. She smiled slightly. Good. He placed the money on the table. She glanced at it, then back at him, and she didn't praise him, didn't celebrate. She just said, that's how it begins. Mike sat down slowly, his body heavy with exhaustion. But as he leaned back, a small smile finally found its way to his face. For the first time since he lost everything, he had taken a real step forward. The second day was harder than the first. Mike woke before sunrise, his entire body aching in ways he had never felt before. His shoulders were stiff, his hands were sore. Even turning his neck reminded him of the bags of sand he had carried the day before. For a moment he lay there staring at the ceiling. A quiet thought whispered in his mind. You don't have to go back. But then another voice answered just as quickly. If you stop now, you'll stay here forever. He slowly pushed himself. Up across the room, Eniola was already awake, getting ready. She noticed the way he moved. You're feeling it today, she said calmly. Mike let out a tired breath. I didn't know my body could hurt like this. She gave a small smile. That's because it hasn't worked like this in years. He nodded. She was right. For a long time, his work had been meetings, numbers, calls, decisions. Now it was lifting, carrying, sweating, breathing through pain, and strangely, he didn't hate it. At the site, the sun was already strong. The men moved slowly, used to the routine. Mike picked up the first bag of sand and felt the weight settle into his arms. Today, it felt heavier. But he lifted it anyway, trip after trip. Back. And forth. At first, his muscles protested loudly. But after a while, something changed. His body adjusted. His breathing found rhythm. His mind grew quiet. And as he worked, he started noticing things he had never paid attention to before. How the men moved carefully to save their strength, how they paced themselves, how they worked together without speaking much. There was a system to it, a quiet discipline. No one was rushing, no one was showing off. They were just working. At midday, they sat in the shade to eat. Mike opened the small food Eniola had packed. For him, simple rice, nothing special, but it tasted good, better than some of the expensive meals he used to eat. One of the older workers sat beside him. You're new, the man said. Mike nodded. Yes. You worked in construction before? Mike shook his head. No. The man studied him. You don't look like someone who's done this kind of work. Mike gave a small, tired smile. I haven't. The man nodded slowly. But you're still here, he said. Mike didn't respond, but those words stayed with him. Days turned into a week, then 2. Mike kept showing up, every morning, every afternoon. His hands grew rougher, his shoulders grew stronger. The cake tea. Work didn't get easier, but he got used to it, and with every day that passed, something inside him began to shift. The noise in his mind started to quiet, the anger, the confusion, the constant replay of what he lost. It slowly began to fade, because, now, his days had purpose again. One evening, as he sat outside the small room, rubbing his sore hands, Eniola came and sat beside him. You're getting stronger, she said. Mike looked down at his palms. The skin had changed, calluses forming. Nodded. I didn't think I would last this long, he admitted. Eniola tilted her head slightly. Why? He shrugged. I've never started from this low before. She was quiet for a moment, then she said something that stayed with him. Sometimes you have to go back to the ground to learn how to build properly. Mike looked at her. Those words hit deeper than she probably realized. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, but because his mind had started moving again. For the first time in months, he wasn't just thinking about survival. He was thinking about ideas, about structure, about systems. As he worked each day, he had been watching how materials were managed, how time was wasted, how small changes could make things more efficient. It was instinct, the part of him that used to build, the part of him that used to see opportunity. It wasn't dead. It had just been buried. The next evening, he spoke while they were eating. I noticed something at the site today, he said. Eniola looked up. What? The way they handle deliveries, he continued. It's slow, disorganized. They lose time every day. She listened quietly. I kept thinking, there's a better way to manage it, he said. Eniola watched him carefully. This was the Fae. First time she had seen that look in his eyes, the one that meant his mind was working again. Then think about it, she said calmly. Mike paused. Think about what? How to make it better, she replied. That's what you used to do, right? He sat back slightly. It was such a simple statement, but it reminded him of who he had been and who he still could be. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The first time since losing everything. He wasn't thinking about the past, he was thinking about what could come next, and this time, it didn't start with millions. It started with observation, with patience, with understanding, with building, slowly from the ground up, again. The work continued, day after day, the same early mornings, the same heat, the same dust in the air, the same steady rhythm of lifting, carrying, moving. But something had changed. At first, Mike had focused only on surviving the day. Now, his eyes were beginning to notice things again. Small things, the way materials arrived late, the way workers waited around with nothing to do, the way tools were misplaced and time was wasted looking for them. The way instructions were given too late or not clearly at all. It reminded him of something. Not the pain, not the loss, but the part of his life where he used to study problems and quietly think of better ways to fix them. That part of him was waking up again. One afternoon, as they waited for a delivery that was running late, Mike found himself watching the chaos around him. Men stood idle, wiping sweat from their faces. A truck finally arrived, and suddenly everyone was rushing. No order, no direction, just noise and movement, time slipping away. Without thinking, Mike stepped forward. "Put the cement on that side," he said to one of the workers. "If you stack it here, you won't have to carry it back later." The man paused, looked at him, then shrugged, and did it. Mike turned to another. "Move the sand closer before you unload. It'll save you trips." Another pause. Then the man nodded and followed. Within minutes, the space started to feel more organised, less scattered. The new supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Bala, stood a few feet away, watching. He didn't say anything, he just observed. Later that day, Bala walked over. "You've worked in places like this before?" he asked. Mike wiped the sweat from his forehead. "No." Bala raised an eyebrow. "You speak like someone who has." Mike hesitated. For a moment he thought about explaining. About telling him everything. But instead he just said, "I used to manage people." Bala studied him for a long second, then nodded slowly. "I can see that." Over the next few days, Bala began giving Mike small responsibilities. Nothing big. Tell. Then where to put the blocks. Make sure the tools are returned after work. Watch the delivery list. Mike didn't rush, didn't try to take over, he just helped. Quietly. Respectfully. And the other workers noticed. At first, they were unsure. Who was this man who worked like them, but spoke like he saw more? But Mike never spoke down to anyone. Never. Acted like he was better. He lifted the same bags, sweated the same way, ached the same way, so slowly. They began to listen. One evening, Bala called him aside. "You learn fast," Bala said. Mike nodded slightly. "I pay attention," he replied. Bala crossed his arms. "Where did you learn to organise like that?" Mike looked down at his hands. For a moment, he considered keeping it to himself, but something told him it was time to stop hiding. "I used to run companies," he said quietly. Bala blinked. "Companies?" Mike nodded. "Yes." Bala studied him again, this time more carefully. Then he asked the question Mike had been waiting for. "So what happened?" Mike took a slow breath. "Bad decisions," he said. "And trusting the wrong people." Bala nodded slowly. He didn't laugh, didn't mock him, he just said, "That happens." And that was it. No judgment, just understanding. That night, when Mike returned, Iniola could see the difference in his face. There was something new there, not pride, not confidence, but something close. "They're letting me help organise things," he said as he sat down. Iniola handed him a cup of water. "That's good," she said. Mike nodded. "It feels strange," he admitted. "Using my mind again." She gave a small smile. "You never stopped having it." He sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "I forgot who I was." Iniola shook her head gently. "No," she said. "You just lost your balance." The next week, Bala handed him a notebook. "Write down what comes in and what goes out," he said. "We lose track too easily." Mike took it, and something about holding that notebook brought back memories, tracking numbers, planning movement, seeing systems. For the first time since everything fell apart, he felt useful again, not because of money, but because of value. One afternoon, as Mike carefully listed materials, Bala leaned over. "You think this place can run better?" he asked. Mike didn't answer immediately. He looked around, at the men working, at the disorganized stacks, at the wasted space. "Yes," he said finally. Bala nodded once. "Then show me," he said. Mike felt something shift inside him, a door. Small one, but real. For the first time since he lost everything, someone was giving him a chance to build again, not from the top, but from the ground. And this time, he was ready to do it right. The notebook became part of Mike's daily routine. He carried it everywhere, every delivery that came in, he wrote it down, every material used, he recorded it, every delay, he noted it quietly. At first, it was just a simple list, but after a few days, patterns started forming. He noticed when trucks came late. He noticed when certain materials ran out faster than expected. He noticed how much time workers spent waiting for instructions, things most people ignored, things he used to build entire systems around. One afternoon, Bala stood beside him as Mike flipped through the pages. "You write a lot," Bala said. Mike nodded. "It helps me see what's happening," he replied. Bala leaned closer. "What do you see?" Mike hesitated, then he pointed to a few entries. "These deliveries come late almost every week," he said. "When they're late, work slows down." Bala nodded slowly. "And this," Mike continued, pointing again. "You're ordering too little sand at a time, so the workers stop while waiting for more." Bala's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger, in thought. Mike stopped there. He didn't want to overstep, but Bala surprised him. "What would you change?" he asked. Mike looked up. For a moment, he felt like he was back in a meeting room again, people asking for his opinion. Waiting, for his direction, but this time was different. This time, he chose his words carefully. "I'd order in bulk," he said slowly. "Less waiting, less interruption." Bala nodded. "And?" Mike glanced around. "Have a clear place for everything. Tools, materials, workers won't waste time looking." Bala stood there quietly for a moment, then he gave a short nod. "Try it," he said. The next few days felt different. Mike began guiding small changes, nothing big, just small adjustments. Stack the blocks closer. Move the sand before the tow. Truck arrives. Keep the tools in one place. At first, the workers looked unsure, but when the work started flowing more smoothly, they noticed fewer delays, less confusion, more progress. The site began to feel more organised, more focused, and slowly, the men began coming to him. "Where should we put this? What comes next? Is this enough for today?" Mike answered calmly, respectfully, never like a boss, just like someone helping. One evening, Bala walked the length of the site, watching the men work. He stopped beside Mike. "You've changed things," Bala said. Mike shrugged. Just small things. Bala shook his head. Small things make big differences. He pointed toward the far end of the site. Before, we would still be working there at sunset. Now we finish earlier. Mike didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. The respect started growing quietly. The older workers stopped seeing him as just the new man. They saw his consistency, his discipline, his willingness to do the same hard work as everyone else. He still carried bags, still mixed sand, still got dirty. But now, they also listened when he spoke, and that mattered. That night, when he returned, Eniola noticed the change immediately. He wasn't just tired anymore, he was focused. "They're letting you lead more," she said, setting food on the table. Mike sat down slowly. "A little," he admitted. She nodded. "You look different." Mike frowned slightly. "Different how?" "Like your mind is back where it belongs," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "It feels familiar." He leaned back. "I forgot how much I used to think. Plan. Watch things." Eniola smiled softly. A few days later, Bala called him aside again. "I have another site starting next month," Bala said. Mike listened carefully. "I need someone to help keep things organized there," Bala continued. "Track materials, watch the workers, make sure nothing is wasted." Mike's heart beat a little faster. This was different. This wasn't just lifting and carrying, this was responsibility. Bala looked him straight in the eye. "You think you can handle that?" Mike didn't answer right away. He remembered the man. He used to be, the decisions he made, the pride, the mistakes, but he also remembered the man he was becoming, patient, careful, grounded. This time his answer was steady. "Yes," he said. Bala nodded once. "Good. We start soon." That night, Mike sat outside longer than usual. The air was cooler, the street quieter. He stared at his hands again, still rough, still scarred from the work. But now they felt strong, useful, capable. He thought about the day he sat in the rain, soaked, broken, invisible, and now. A door was opening, not a big one, not yet, but it was enough. He turned as Eniola stepped outside and sat beside him. "They trust you now," she said. Mike nodded slowly. "They're starting to." She looked at him. "I told you," she said softly. "You could start again." Mike looked up at the night sky, and for the first time in a long time he believed it too. The new site was farther from the city. Less noise, less traffic, more open land. It wasn't as large as the first one, but it had potential. New foundations were being laid. Trucks came and went. Workers moved steadily under the heat of the sun, and now Mike wasn't just another man carrying cement. He was watching, tracking, guiding. Bala handed him a small stack of papers on the first morning. "Deliveries, worker lists, schedule," Bala said. "Keep everything in order." Mike nodded, taking them carefully. There was no grand introduction, no big announcement, but everyone could see it. He was no longer just part of the line. He had responsibility now. The first few days were quiet. Mike didn't rush to change things. He observed first. He walked through the site slowly, watching how people moved, where materials were placed, where time was lost. He spoke less, listened more. And when he finally began suggesting small adjustments, he did it gently. "Let's keep the tools here so they're easier to find. Move the sand before the truck arrives. Start this section earlier so we don't rush later." Nothing dramatic, but it made a difference. The work flowed more smoothly. Less shouting. Less confusion, less wasted effort. The men started coming to him naturally. "What comes next? Where do we put this?" "Is this enough for today?" Mike answered calmly. He didn't speak like a boss. He spoke like someone working with them, and because of that, they listened. One afternoon, Bala stood at the edge of the site, arms folded, watching everything. He turned to Mike. "You're different from before," he said. Mike looked up from the notebook. Before? Bala nodded. When you first came. You worked hard, but you stayed quiet, like someone hiding. Mike didn't respond, because it was true. And now? Bala continued. Now you move like someone who understands what he's doing. Mike let out a slow breath. I'm remembering, he said. Bala nodded once. Good. At the end of each week, Mike received his pay, still small, still simple. But this time he didn't spend it quickly. He kept a little aside, carefully, quietly. He had started a small envelope, hidden safely in his bag. Each week, it grew just a little. It wasn't much, but it meant something. It meant he was moving forward. At night, he would sit with Eniola, the envelope resting in his hands. Saving? She asked one evening. Mike nodded. A little. She smiled. That's how it begins. He looked at the envelope again. I used to move money in millions, he said softly. And now? She asked. Now I'm learning to respect small amounts. He replied. Eniola nodded. Small amounts teach you patience, she said. Mike looked up at her. And patience protects what you build. The more time he spent on the site, the more his mind started working again. Not just about the daily tasks, but about the bigger picture. He watched how suppliers came and went, how materials were ordered, how payments were handled. He noticed inefficiencies. Places. Where money was lost, places where things could be better. The ideas started forming again, slowly, naturally. But this time, he didn't rush, he didn't speak too quickly, he just watched and learned. One afternoon, a delivery truck arrived late again. The driver argued with one of the workers. Voices rose. Time was being wasted. Mike stepped in calmly. Let's unload first, he said. Then sought the problem. The driver looked at him, annoyed at first, but something in Mike's voice made him pause. They unloaded. The argument softened, and by the end of it, the situation was settled without shouting. Bala saw the whole thing. Later, he pulled Mike aside. You handle people well, Bala said. Mike gave a small shrug. I've had practice. Bala studied him. Who were you before all this? He asked quietly. Mike paused. Then he answered honestly. I built businesses. Bala nodded slowly. I can see that. That night, Mike sat outside longer than usual. The air was cool, the city quieter. He looked at his hands again, still rough, still strong. But now, they felt steady. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was learning again, growing again, thinking again, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine something he had been afraid to think about. Not the old life, not the mansion, not the money, but a new start. Built the right way. Eniola stepped outside and sat beside him. You're thinking again, she said. Mike nodded. Yes. She didn't ask what about. She just waited. After a moment, he spoke. I see things differently now, he said. I notice things I never used to notice. Eniola smiled softly. That's wisdom, she said. Mike leaned back, looking at the sky. I used to think money made me strong, he said quietly. And now? She asked. Now I know strength is built slowly, he replied. Eniola nodded. And what you build slowly, she said, lasts longer. Mike sat with those words. And somewhere deep inside, the foundation of something new was forming, not loud, not fast, but steady. The new site began to grow faster than anyone expected. Work moved smoothly. Materials were used more carefully. Fewer delays, less confusion. And quietly, without anyone making a big announcement, Mike had become the one people looked for when something needed direction. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. One morning, a delivery truck pulled in earlier than usual. A man stepped out, dressed neatly, holding a clipboard. He didn't look like the usual drivers who came and went. He stood at the edge of the site for a while, watching the way materials were unloaded, watching the way workers moved, watching the way Mike walked from one end of the site to the other, checking, guiding, organising. After some time, he approached Bala. "Who is that?" the man asked, nodding toward Mike. Bala followed his gaze. "That's Mike," he replied. "He helps me keep things in order." The man watched a little longer. "He's not just helping," he said. "He's managing." Bala gave a small smile. "Yes," he said. "He is." Later that afternoon, Bala called Mike over. "This is Mr. Okoye," he said, introducing the man. Mike wiped the dust from his hands and nodded respectfully. "Good afternoon, sir." Mr. Okoye looked at him carefully. "You run this place well," he said. Mike shook his head slightly. "I just help keep things organised." Mr. Okoye didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Have you done this kind of work before?" Mike paused. Then, as he had learned to do, he answered simply, "I used to manage businesses." Mr. Okoye's eyes narrowed slightly. "Used to?" Mike nodded. "Yes." There was a brief silence. Then Mr. Okoye said, "I can tell." Over the next few days, Mr. Okoye came around more often. Sometimes he spoke to Bala. Sometimes he stood quietly, watching the flow of work. And sometimes he spoke directly to Mike, asking small questions. "How do you decide where to place materials? How do you know how much to order? How do you keep track of waste?" Mike answered calmly, carefully. He didn't try to impress. He just spoke from experience, and with every conversation, something began to shift. One afternoon, as the sun began to drop lower, Mr. Okoye called Mike aside. "I supply materials to several sites," he said. "And I see the same problems everywhere. Delays, waste, poor planning." Mike listened quietly. "But here," Mr. Okoye continued, looking around, "things moved differently." Mike didn't say anything. He wasn't sure where the conversation was going. Then Mr. Okoye said something that made his heart beat faster. "I could use someone who understands systems," he said. "Someone who can help coordinate deliveries and site needs." Mike blinked. He hadn't expected that. "Sir," he said softly. "I'm expanding," Mr. Okoye continued. "More sites, more movement. I need someone who can keep things running smoothly." Mike stood still, unsure how to respond. For a moment, fear crept in. Not fear of failure, but fear of stepping back into that world again. The world where everything had once fallen apart. That night, he sat outside longer than usual. The envelope, in his hand, felt heavier now, not just because it held money, but because it held the proof that he had rebuilt something from nothing. Eniola came and sat beside him quietly. "You look troubled," she said. Mike nodded slowly. A man offered. "Me something today?" he said. "What kind of something?" "Work," he replied. "More responsibility, better pay, bigger role." Eniola waited. "And?" she asked gently. Mike stared ahead. "I don't know if I'm ready." She studied him for a moment. "Why not?" Mike took a deep breath. "I trusted people before," he said. "I moved too fast. I thought I was untouchable." He looked down at his hands. "I don't want to lose myself again." Eniola nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. Mike looked up, surprised. "Good?" "Yes," she replied. "Because now you're careful." She leaned back slightly. "Before you ran forward without looking. Now you're thinking." Mike was quiet. She continued. "That means you've learned." He let those words sink in. "You think I should take it?" he asked. Eniola shrugged gently. "I think you should grow," she said. "But this time, grow with your eyes open." Mike nodded slowly. That was the difference. Before, he had rushed. This time, he would move carefully, step by step. The next day, he found Mr. Okoye again. "Sir," Mike said respectfully, "I'm interested. but I want to do things the right way. Mr. Okoye smiled slightly. That's exactly why I asked you. They talked for a long time. About the role, about responsibilities, about trust, and for the first time since losing everything. Mike stepped into a new opportunity, not with pride, not with excitement, but with quiet wisdom. That evening, he returned and placed the envelope on the table. Next to it, he placed a small paper, a written agreement. Eniola looked at it. You took it, she said. Mike nodded. Yes. She smiled. Good. He sat down slowly. This time I'm starting again, he said. But differently. Eniola looked at him. How? Mike leaned back. Slowly, carefully, and with the right people. And, for the first time since everything collapsed, the road ahead didn't feel uncertain anymore. It felt steady. The work with Mr. Okoye started small. At first, Mike simply helped coordinate deliveries between sites. He tracked orders, confirmed arrivals, made sure materials were going where they were needed most. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered, and for the first time since his fall, he found himself doing something familiar again, thinking ahead, planning carefully, solving problems before they grew bigger. Only this time, everything was different. He asked more questions. He checked every detail. He trusted slowly, and most of all, he stayed humble. Months passed. The small envelope he once kept hidden grew thicker. His clothes slowly changed from worn to neat. His posture grew stronger again. But he never forgot. The feeling of sitting in the rain. That memory stayed with him. It kept his feet on the ground. Mr. Okoye began relying on him more. Soon, Mike wasn't just coordinating deliveries, he was helping plan site schedules, managing supplier movement, reducing delays, saving money through better organisation. One afternoon, Mr. Okoye sat across from him, looking over a stack of reports. You think like a builder, the man said. Mike gave a small smile. I've learned to be careful, he replied. Mr. Okoye nodded. That's what makes a strong foundation. Opportunities began opening. One led to another. Mike started helping manage multiple sites at once. Then he began advising on how to structure supply flow more efficiently. Then, slowly, he began putting small savings into something new. Not a big company. Not a fast move, just a small logistics idea, built step by step, patiently, quietly. Through it all, he stayed in the same small room, even when he could afford something bigger. Even when he could afford comfort again, Eniola noticed. You can move now, she said one evening. You don't have to stay here. Mike shook his head gently. Not yet. She looked at him curiously. Why? He sat down slowly. Because this place reminds me who I became here. She didn't ask him to explain. She understood. Their friendship had grown stronger over time. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. They shared meals, talked in the evenings, laughed sometimes, and in quiet moments, Mike would watch her. The discipline she lived with, the way she stayed focused, the peace she carried. He realised something he hadn't seen before. She had never been waiting for someone to save her. She had already built her own life, and in helping him stand again, she never lost her balance. One evening, as the sun set, and the street grew quiet, Mike spoke softly. You helped me more than you know. Eniola looked over. I didn't do much, she said. Mike shook his head. You gave me space to start again. He paused. And you told me the truth when I needed to hear it. She smiled gently. You were the one who stood up, she said. Mike leaned back. Maybe, he replied. But I needed someone to remind me I could. A year later, things had changed again. Mike had saved enough to start his own small operation. Not a big company, not yet, but a growing logistics service focused on construction supply coordination. He knew the system now, from the ground, from the inside, and this time, He built carefully. He didn't rush, didn't trust easily, didn't chase fast money. He chose his partners slowly, watched their character, paid attention. Work began growing, more sites, more contracts, more responsibility. Money started coming in. Again, not all at once, but steadily, and when he finally moved into a better place. He didn't throw a party, he didn't invite crowds, he just stood inside quietly. Grateful. Humbled. Changed. One afternoon, he returned to the small street where everything had started again. He stood outside Eniola's place for a moment before knocking. When she opened the door, he smiled. "You look like you've been busy," she said. Mike laughed softly, a little. He handed her a small bag. Inside were groceries and some things for the house. She looked up at him. "You didn't have to do this." Mike shook his head. "I wanted to." There was a pause. Then he said something quietly. "I almost lost myself." Back then, Eniola didn't interrupt. "But losing everything," he continued, "helped me find who I was supposed to be." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's how life teaches us," she said. As Mike walked back down the street that evening, the sky turning gold above him, he thought about everything. The mansion, the fall, the rain, the pain, the long climb back. Up, and he realized something deeply. Before, he built with pride. This time, he built with wisdom. Before, he trusted easily. This time, he chose carefully. Before, he thought success meant having everything. Now he understood it meant becoming the right kind of man. And in the quiet of his heart, there was something else. Kind of peace he had never known before. A steady belief that he wasn't alone in the journey, that even when everything fell apart, there was a path back. He just had to walk it. One step at a time. Morale of the story. True success is not measured by how high you rise, but by the humility, wisdom, and character you gain when life forces you to rebuild from the ground up. If you enjoyed this story, please do like and subscribe for more, and also, do leave a comment on what story you would like to hear about.